Hello everyone, my name is Jenelyn Garancho from Group F, week 8 and 9. So, the report I assigned for me is chapter 4, which is the internal organizations of school. So, let's start from section 30, organizations of school. Each school shall establish such internal organization as well best enable it to carry out its academic and administrative function, subject or limitations provided by law. So every schools will establish an organization that will oversee its operation but follow the rules of law. Then each schools may establish guidelines to resolve disputes between school members. So next is section 31, which is governing board. Every government college or university as a tertiary institutions, and every private school shall have a governing board pursuant to its charter or the corporation code of the Philippines as the case may be. So in section 31, each government-owned college and each private school shall be governed by a board in accordance with their policy or corporate policy in the Philippines. That is about the section 31. So next is section 32, the personnel transaction. The terms and conditions of employment or personnel in government schools shall be governed by the civil service, budgetary and compensation laws or rules. Ang mga kawani sa paralan ng pamahalaan at isa sa ilalim ng mga patakaran ng Civil Service Commission at kanilang sahod ay tatakda ng pamahalaan. Sa mga probedong paaralan, anumang hidwaan ng administrasyon at mga empleyado ay nasa ilalim ng pangangasiwa ng kagawaran ng paggawa o kung tinatawag natin na tinatawag natin na DOLE. Ang lahat ng kanilang gawain bilang makawani ng pamahalaan ay susunod sa waling tuntunin ng gagawaran ng edukasyon or ito yung tinatawag natin na DepEd. It is about the section 32. So next is ang chapter 5, School Finance and Assistance. So first dito is ang section 33, Declaration of Policy. Is hereby declared to be the policy of the state that mission government. So the government policy and will assist the support and fund the educational program in accordance with the provision of the Constitution to do this the government well. So we have two types of declaration of policy. First is adopt measures to broaden access to education throughout financial assistance and other forms of incentive to school, teachers, pupils, and students. And so dito, expand academic capacity by providing financial assistance to school teaching and students. Education and government school is free. So number 2 is encourage and stimulate private support organizations throughout. Dito is hamukin ang suporta ng pribadong sektor na mag-ambag na anumang uri ng tulong. Like for example is ang brigada eskwela. That is two types of declaration of policy in section 33. So next is ang founding of public schools. So first is ang section 34. Dito is ang public school will be founded by the government, municipalities, and province can also contribute. In section 34, the national funds. So next is ang section 35, ang financial aid assistance to public secondary schools. The government will assess schools run by local governments such as barangay and municipal high school. That is about the section 35, financial aid assistance to public secondary schools lang. So next is ang section 36, ang share of local governments. Province, cities, and municipalities and barangays shall appropriate funds in their annual budgets for the operations and maintenance of public secondary schools on the basics in National Fund participation. Ang Section 36 is the province or municipalities and barangays will allocate funds in their annual budget to finance the school. That is ang Section 36. So next is ang Section 37, Section 37, which is Special Education Fund. Ang Special Education Fund, ang perang nakukuha ng mga lokal na pamahalaan mula sa Special Education Fund ay gagastusin lamang sa mga inasaad na Section 1 ng Republic CP 5447 at naaayon sa mga patakaran at alintuntunin ng kagawaran ng edukasyon o ito yung tinatawag natin na DepEd. Ang nasabing halaga ay tuturing na funding local at dapat isilalim sa patakaran na nakasaad sa PD number 477 or PD number 1375 at iba pang mga batas. That is about the Section 37, ang Special Education Fund. So next is ang Section 38, ang tuition and other school fees. Dito yung high school and college can collect tuition and other fees to improve facilities and accommodate more students. That is about the tuition and other school fees in Section 38. So last for my report is ang Section 39, ang income from other source. Ang mga paraan na isinusuportahan ng gobyerno ay maaaring tumanggap ng mga donasyon o regalo na pinapayagan ng amiral na batas. Ang mga kita mula sa iba pang ipinagkukunan na maaari ilagay sa pangangasiwa ng mga tsurang paralan, subalit marapat na sumunod sa mga patakaran ng pananalapi na ipinatupad ng Ministry ng Budget, Ministry ng Edukasyon, Kultura at Sports at ng Komisyon ng Audit. That is all about my report and that's all. Thank you.
Good day everyone. So this is the report about the Ministry of the Education and Culture and Sports. Chapter 1, the General Provision. So in Chapter 1, which is the Section 54, which is the Declaration of this policy. So the administration of the education system and pursuant to the provisions of the Constitution and supervisions and regulations of educational institutions are hereby vested in this Ministry of Education and Culture and Sports without a prejudice to the provisions of the charter of any state and college and university. So what is within this section? So the declaration of this policy, which is the educational system, have implemented the educational ministry for the culture and sports, which means that this policy is intended to implement the culture and sports. And this is a privilege also to the educational ministry as they declare the policy is the importance of the cultural and sports. So next is Section 55, which is the organization. The minister shall be headed by Minister of Education and Culture and Sports, who shall be assisted by one or more deputy ministers. So, the organization of ministry shall have consist of this organization of our or the actors within this organization. So, A is the ministry, the proper composed of the immediate office of the minister and services in ministry. And letter B is the Board of Higher Education, which is the hereby to establish the Bureau of Elementary of the Education, the Bureau of the Secondary Education, and the Bureau of the Higher Education, and the Bureau of the Technical Vocational Education, and also the Bureau and Continuing Education, which are hereby to establish the regional offices and field offices and national scholarship centers, and also the cultural agencies, which is the National Library, the National Historical Institute, and National Museum, and so on. So what is within this Section 55? There are certain offices that have functionalities within the structure of the organization, and each organization have a certain roles which have the same pursue to the sports and culture by its means. So next is the Section 56. So the National Board of Education is hereby to abolish its appropriations and personal records and equipment, and hereby to transfer to the Office of the Minister of Education and Culture and Sports. So what is within this section? So which means that they have a specialization of the Minister of Education of Culture and Sports has its own functionality as the National Board of Education abolished by appropriations of personal records and equipments are hereby to transport. So what is next is section 57. So the functions and powers of the minister shall be: number one is formulate the general education and objectives and policies that adopt a long-range educational plans. And number two is a plan to develop to implement the programs and projects in educational culture. Number three is promulgate the rules, regulations, and necessary administration and supervisions and regulations of the educational system in accordance with the declared policy. Number four is to set up the general objectives for the school system. And number five is coordinate the activities and functions of the school system and various cultural agencies under it. So number six is coordinate and work with agencies concerned with the educational and cultural development and national cultural communities and condemn the studies of legislation and propose for adoption. So what is within this section 57? So the minister have a responsibilities that's stated in 7 rules, and the rules and regulations must be followed as it's followed by the law, and which is by the cooperation of the other sections and agencies for the goal of the cultural and sports. So as you can see that this section 57 have promulgated some rules and some policies that indeed to be followed. So section 58, report the Batasang Pamansa. So which is the Minister of the Education and Cultural Sports shall make an annual report and to the Batasang Pambansa on the implementation of National Basic Education Plan and current conditions of educational programs and adequacy and efficiency of the appropriations of the status of expenditures and impacts of the education in different regions and the growth of enrollment and advocacy of the academic facilities and the concentration of the low-income groups or the supply of the teaching and non-teaching personnel, with such as comments and appropriations and recommendations in 30 days before an opening a regular session. So what is within the section? The Ministry of the Cultural Sports have responsibilities of reports and educational plans and other activities, plus the implementation shall be seen by Batasang Pamansa. So they have the responsibilities within this section that they must report in Batasang Pamansa upon their activities and plans within this goal to pursue in cultural and sports, which is they have annual reports, which is those are papers and other things that they need to know about the implementation for enable to seen by the Batasang Pambansa. So chapter 2, the Board of Higher Education. So the declaration of policy. So as you can see that this granted towards to the higher quality education, which is the development of the manpower to the middle and high level manpower of intensification of the research extension and services. And the main function is to achieve the quality and efficiency of the high quality institutions of the higher learning, both public and private. And so they together to provide a complete set of the programs and offerings that meet to the both of national and regional development needs. So what is within this section? The Board of Higher Education have responsibility upon to have a betterment of educational development. This makes the intensify of the research community by itself within the board in the higher education. They are entrusted to achieve the efficiency and high standard of the education, both public and private sectors, and public institutions and private institutions, and so on. So section 60, which is the organization of Board of Higher Education, are the actors or the institutions that have own functionality and have own aspirations within this policy. So the Board of Higher Education is advisory by the body of the Minister of Education, Culture and Sports, and the board shall be composed by Deputy Ministers of Education, Chairman, and other members, and so on. So as you can see that these are they have 4 members that distinguish themselves in the higher field of the education. So the public and private sectors have this initial appointment of non-ex officio members. And first is appointee shall be receive a 4-year terms. They have a year term. The second term is 3 years, and the third term is 2 years. So the director of the Bureau of Higher Education shall participate this deliberation of the board, but without a right to vote. So to enable to understand this, that this they have appointed the members, but the Bureau of Higher Education shall not be deliberated, and shall not have a rights to vote about these appointees. So the Bureau of Higher Education shall provide a board of necessary technical staff or support, which is that is a board is created by technical panels and experts by various disciplines, and indeed arises. So what is within the law? These organizations are the functionalities in institutions which is distinguished by their role. They are specialized by positions as chairmen and ministers of the cultural and sports. This also emphasizes the year services of the appointees within this organization. So next is the section 61. So the board, higher education, the board shall make policies and recommendations regarding to the plan and management of integrated system of the higher education and continuing the evaluation thereof. So second is the recommend to the Minister of Higher Education, Culture and Sports are steps to improve the governance in various components of the higher education systems and the national and regional levels. Number 3 is assessed by the Minister of Education and Culture and Sports and making by recommendations by relatives and generations of resources of their allocation in for the higher education. So what is within the law? So the higher board of education has responsibilities that lie within the policy, within the recommendations, which shall have thoughts and actions within the management or the institution. Therefore, they are evaluating such plans for the betterment within the system of the cultural and sports. They are also responsible for the governance within the national and regional levels in terms of improving the system, especially the culture and sports. And number 3 is the board of the education has powers to assist and manage these resources upon distributing them for the goal of the culture and sports. So this is the end of my topic. I hope that you got something about it. So thank you, and that's all, and good day.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerddy MAe Rebong, and I will be going to continue the reporting of Chapter 5, which is earlier that is led by Ms. Garancho. And now we will going to discuss another topic, which is the funding of private schools up to assistance to students. So first, let's discuss the funding of private schools. We have Section 40. The funding of private schools is generally provided through charges, tuition fees, donation. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerddy MAe Rebong, and I will be going to continue the reporting of Chapter 5, which is earlier that is led by Ms. Garancho. And now we will going to discuss another topic, which is the funding of private schools up to assistance to students. So first, let's discuss the funding of private schools. We have Section 40. The funding of private schools is generally provided through charges, tuition fees, donations, and grants from organizations of private individuals and other sources. So they get all their profits of school from those resources that they may use from school improvements and enhancements. So another one, we have Section 41, the government assistance, which is the government in recognition of their complementary role in the educational system may provide aid to the programs of private schools in the form grants or scholarship or loans from government's financial institutions. So this means that tuition fees are supplements students in private schools given financial assistance from sa schools, sa private, or other universities. They provided by the government through a voucher system, just like CHED, where ito, senior high, days na to, and TESDA, we have also that, educational loans from SSS, and other governmental scholarships. So the next one is section tuition and other fees. So each private schools shall determine its rates of tuition and other fees or charges. This means that private schools are allowed to increase their tuition fees and other school fees, but not more than the current inflation rate. So in addition to that, the introduction of new fees and other charges need to be declared, and according to the article that I've read in Republic Act number 6130, and now we will going Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerddy MAe Rebong, and I will be going to continue the reporting of Chapter 5, which is earlier, and that is led by Ms. Garancho. And now we will going to discuss another topic, which is the funding of private schools up to assistant to students. So first, let's discuss the funding of private schools. We have Section 40. The funding of private schools is generally provided through charges, tuition fees, donations, and grants from organizations of private individuals and other sources. So they get all their profits of school from those resources that they may use from school improvements and enhancements. So another one, we have Section 41, the government assistance, which is the government in recognition of their complementary role in the educational system may provide aid to the programs of private schools in the form grants or scholarship or loans from government's financial institutions. So this means that tuition fees are supplements students in private schools given financial assistance from sa schools, sa private, or other universities. They provided by the government through a voucher system, just like CHED, ito, senior high, days na to, and TESDA, we have also that, educational loans from SSS, and other governmental scholarships. So the next one is Section 42, the tuition and other fees. So each private schools shall determine its rates of tuition and other fees or charges. So this means that private schools are allowed to increase their tuition fees and other school fees, but not more than the current inflation rate. So in addition to that, the introduction of new fees and other charges need to be declared, and according to the article that I've read in Republic Act number 6139, Section 2, states that any private schools which desires to revise its rates or tuition fees or other school fees or charges shall file an application thereof from the Secretary of Education and Culture. So if they want to increase or changes in their school fees, so they must file first. Another one is we have Section 43, the income from other sources. So it says any private school duly recognized by the government may receive any grant and legacy donations or gifts. So it means that, as what I have said earlier in Section 40, that private schools may have fund from different sectors, including the private sectors, and because private schools are allowed to receive donations, gifts from other different organizations or private institutions. Furthermore, private schools are authorized to engage in any auxiliary enterprises to generate income primarily to finance the educational operations and or to reduce or to increase the fees. So another section is section 44, the institutional funds. So it says here that the proceeds from tuition fees and other school charges as well as other income of school shall be treated as institutional funds. So the earnings of profits from tuition fees and other school fees as well as school revenue as to be considered institutional funds since it is a private institution, yung private schools. And schools may combine their institutional funds in a whole or in a part for the purpose of generating additional financial resources under joint management. So that is for the funding of private schools. And now we have the to the incentives to education. We have section 45, a declaration of policy. It is the policy of the state in the pursuit of its national education development goals to provide an incentive program to encourage the participation of the community in the development of the educational sector. And another that is section 46 relating to school property. So it means that the private school pay taxes to those properties, buildings for 15% of it. Also, not all the earnings from the payment thereof shall be submitted in a special private education fund, which shall be managed and distributed by a local private school board, which shall be established in each municipal or chartered city with private educational institution. And next, we have a section 46 relating to school property, which means that real properties such as lands, building, other improvements thereon usually actually directly and exclusively for educational purposes will be subjected to real property tax. And we have section 47 relating to gifts or donations to school. So it means that, as what I have said earlier in section, I guess it's section 43, yes, and it states here in section 47 that private schools were permitted or allowed to accept gifts, grants, and donations from organizations, and individuals are excluded from, and these are excluded from taxes. So this means that the gifts or contributions or donations that they receive can be only used to upgrade their school facilities and will not used to support any school officers, director, officials, or maybe used as salary or adjustments or allowances except in support of faculty and professional chairs. And next, we have section 48 relating to earnings from established scholarship funds. So this means that the government recognizes the earnings of scholarships in private schools and contributions and gifts from various sectors were also used to grant scholarships to students and are tax-free until the scholarship fund is completely liquidated. The next one is we have section 49, school dispersal program. So this means that profits earned from private schools are tax-free if they are reinvested. But if they are not reinvested, so they are subjected to taxation and they're going to pay it immediately. The last section is section 50, the conversion to educational foundation. So this section means that in accordance with the implementation rules to be issued jointly by the Ministry of Education, Culture and Sport, and the Ministry of Finance, an academic institution can transform itself into a non-stock profit educational foundation. So the school have freedom to decide whether they're going to transform itself from non-stock or not.
So good afternoon, everyone. So I am Lopez. So I will be discussing the last chapter of what Mr. Duarte has been discussed. So it is still under the Ministry of Education, Culture and Sports. The and now it is the chapter 3, the bureaus. So in section 62, Bureau of Elementary Education, the bureau shall perform the following functions: First is to conduct studies and formulate, develop, and evaluate programs and educational standards for elementary education. Second is to undertake studies necessary for the preparation of prototype curricular designs, instructional materials, and teacher training programs for elementary education, and formulate guidelines to improve elementary school physical plans and equipment and general management of the schools. So it is to provide the knowledge and develop the skills, attitudes, and values essential to a personal development of an elementary student. This is to provide learning experience which increase the child's awareness of of also being responsive to the change of the environment and just the demands of society, and to prepare him on constructive and effective involvement. So for the next section 63, this is the same on elementary education, but this is the secondary education. Still conduct studies and formulate, develop programs and cultural standards for secondary education. Develop curricular designs, prepare instruction materials, and prepare and evaluate programs. It's to update the quality of the teaching and the teaching staff at the secondary level. Formulate guidelines to improve the secondary school physical plans and equipment and general management of the schools. This is to formulate them and the policies, plans, programs for the secondary level, including the adult section, where they will be provided by working guide training for them in a pre-university preparation, and to have skills to train them for employment and adequately met. But the difference in here is that they are being more monitored and seeing potential so that they will know what profession they can be. So, for example, during our grade 10, we have been conduct surveys, so they will see our potentials, uh, identify our specific profession. And for section 64, the Bureau of Technical and Vocational Education, the Bureau shall perform the following. First is to collaborate with other agencies in the formulation of manpower plans. Second is to conduct studies, formulate, develop, and evaluate post-secondary vocational technical programs and recommend educational standards for these programs. Develop curricular designs, prepare instructional materials, prepare evaluate programs to upgrade the quality of teaching and teaching staff, and and other physical plant equipment for best post-secondary vocational technical schools. Uh, this is to strengthen, promote, coordinate, and expand program for vocational educators. This is to enhance their socio-economic program of the government through the development of skilled manpower in terms in agriculture, trade, and other industries, also to other vocational courses. This is to have them opportunities if they are not going to pursue high school. This is to inform them more resources, more opportunities, and to help them chase their dreams and to help them in terms of finding jobs. So next is the Section 65, Bureau of Higher Education. The Bureau of Higher Education shall perform the following functions. First is to develop, formulate, evaluate programs, projects, and educational standards for higher education. Provide staff assistance to a Board of Higher Education in its policy, formulation, and advisory functions. Provide technical assistance to encourage institutional development programs and projects. Compile, analyze, evaluate data on higher education, and perform other functions provided for the law. Uh, they have to develop these programs to enhance the higher educators to perform well in school and improve students' guide them in the near future. It is any form of professional help, guidance, or support to be more effective in the performance of their functions. They will be supervising, monitoring, evaluating, directing, and instructing so that students will be more serious, and also to evaluate the course that they enter in. So for the next is the section 66, it's Bureau of Continuing Education. As the main implementing arm of the non-formal education programs of the ministry, the Bureau shall provide learning programs or activities that shall first serve as means of meeting the learning needs of those unable to avail themselves of the educational services and programs of formal education, provide opportunities for the acquisition of skills necessary to enhance, ensure continuing employability, efficiency, productivity, and competitiveness in the labor market, serve as means for expanding access to educational opportunities. This is to provide opportunities to those who want to pursue their education. So there are provided free education like TESDA in ASL or alternative learning system. It is also to help them still pursue their dreams and not worry in the future because of this free education. So for the next is the regional offices. So in section 67, functions a regional official. First, to formulate the regional plan of education based on the national plan of ministry, taking into account the specific needs and special traditions of the region. Implement education laws, policies, plans, programs, rules, and regulations of the ministry or agency in the regional area. Provide economical, efficient, and effective education services to the people in the area. It makes sure the institution's success. It considers the significant issues, constraints, conditions, and factors of education. This is to focus is on the potential objectives, goals, and visions of the school. Upon implementing a law, programs, rules, this is to ensure that all the set amendment are stated to be followed. So for next is and for the last, I not the last, but the last on the under on the Ministry of Sports pa yun siya, and is the miscellaneous provisions. So penal administrative sanctions. So Um, so if we say penal administrative sanction, this means the penalties or fines, costs, or charges on unnecessary actions. So for the section 68 penalty clause, For the Section 68 penalty clause, any person upon conviction for an act of violation of Section 28, Chapter 3, Title the third above shall be punished with a fine of not less than 2,000 pesos nor more than 10,000 pesos or imprisonment for a maximum period of 2 years or both in the discretion of the court. This penalty comes from the Section 28, which is the Section 28 is the effects of recognition punishable violations. If someone is doing a criminal offense about this law, he or she may be punishable. So, for example, if he uses the school for him to enter the job, then masaktan siya sa agency na dili day siya graduate on that school, and and it was being reported on the school and also in the agency. So the person involved has to be responsible for her actions, and as it said also, if the act is committed by a school corporation, the school had together with the person is responsible for the offense or violation shall be equally liable. So next is section 69, the administrative sanction. So the Minister of Education, Culture, and Sports may prescribe and impose such administrative sanctions as he may deem reasonable and appropriate in implementing rules and regulations promulgated pursuant to this act for any of the following causes: mismanagement of schools, gross inefficiency of the teaching or non-teaching personnel, fraud or deceit committed in connection with the application for ministry permit or recognition. If the school didn't follow if the school didn't follow the rules and implementation given by the law of education, then the said gross deficiency in the number two, the employment of a person will be terminated and some may be affected in their profession. If the part of the teaching and not teaching results in damage for the benefit of all, then it must be reported in the higher institution. and also number four, failure to comply with conditions or obligations prescribed by the school or implementing the rules and regulation, the unauthorized operation of a school or course or any component thereof, or any violation of the requirement governing advertisements or announcements of educational institutions that that they they may always again or stated that it always comply what the education have to comply, so the school will not be suspended. And if masakpan sa taga DepEd na ang school ay gumagawa ng unnecessary project and not been reported sa kanila, then violation may occur on the school. So always give reports, announcements for students, teachers, and staffs in the school. So for the last is the Chapter 2, the administrative provisions. So for Section 70, rulemaking authority, the Minister of Education, Culture, and Sports charged with the administration and enforcement of this act shall promulgate the necessary implementing rules and regulations. They are in charge in making the rules for the betterment of school and for all. Section 71, severability provision. Any part of provision for this act which may help invalid or unconstitutional shall not affect its remaining parts of provisions. Guys, some provision on this act is separable. So if there are some provisions for this act that affect some portions of the agreement. And for the last is repealing clause. All clause or parts thereof inconsistent with any provision of this act shall be deemed repealed or modified as the case may be. So if the law is not staying the same throughout on this act, so it will be revoked or make partial or minor changes to improve it more. So in section 73, effectivity, this act shall take effect upon its approval. So it was being approved in September 11, 1982. So thank you for listening to our report, and may God bless us all. Thank you, everyone.